Coming up, we talked to a woman who went through, oh gosh, unimaginable situation, being thrown out of her job, being investigated just because of who she was. It's something you won't want to miss if you saw the headlines about Dame Kelly Holmes coming out. And the reason that she kept it quiet for so long was because it was a crime to be gay in the military up until, I think, the year 2000. Welcome back. Now, just imagine being hauled from your bed in the early hours, arrested and subject to an intense 3-hour probe at the hands of... Welcome back. Now, just imagine being hauled from your bed in the early hours, arrested and subject to an intense 3-hour probe at the hands of investigators. Then they comb through your personal possessions, ask if you own any quote unquote electrical equipment, and then hand a personal letter that you've written to a pen pal over to prosecutors. Then you're sent home to tell your parents that not only have you been thrown out of your dream job, but the reason why. Emma Riley recently featured in a recent documentary, Kelly Holmes, Being Me, during which the Olympic gold medalist opened up about parts of her life for the very first time. It followed the fact that on June 18th, Dame Kelly Holmes announced that she's gay, something that she had to keep absolutely secret during her career in the armed forces. Now, that's something that former radio operator first class Emma Riley knows all too well, because that opening scenario that I gave you is a very brief and very trauma-less. I mean, there would have been a lot more trauma involved. That's something that's what happened to Emma Riley, and she joins me now. Emma, thank you so much for your time. So at the time that you were in the armed forces, it was illegal to be gay in any shape or form. What happened to you?
It is pretty much what you just said. I joined in 1990. It was the one thing that I wanted to do since the age of about 13. I wanted to serve my country, and the Wrens seemed the perfect opportunity. My parents and family had always sailed, so it seemed like absolutely the right thing to do. And at the time that I joined, I wasn't sure what kind of person I was. So I went in and was intending to serve for as long as I possibly could. Fast forward to 1993, my father had just gone through a quadruple bypass and he was having blackouts. It hadn't gone particularly wonderfully. And so I was under a lot of stress. And at this point, I felt that I probably was gay. So I was under a great deal of pressure at that moment. And one night, I went out with the person that I was sharing a room with, and I thought they were my friend. And so at one point, I said, I think I might be gay. And basically that person phoned up the military police and told them. And so, yeah, the next morning it was get up, get dressed, get downstairs, you're under arrest. That was it.
And what was it? How did they interrogate you? What were they trying to find out?
Well, at the time, it was a real witch hunt era for gays in the military. If you were found to be gay or thought to be gay, they would go through a long interrogation to find out who you were underneath the surface. But most specifically, they were looking for other names of other people that they could then go and target afterwards. So when they went through all my stuff, including, as you said, a letter to a pen pal, which is, I think, the one actual hard physical piece of evidence that they actually had, because the other stuff that they confiscated, like a Suede album cover and a Julian Clary video, aren't really concrete proof that one is gay. But anyway, they were looking for names. I know that having heard other stories since I started speaking about this, I know that they followed the trail. So if somebody had written a name in a diary or a letter or something, they would go and find that person wherever they might be if they were in the armed services and arrest them and interrogate them. And etc., etc.
Wow.
That was horrible.
And then you're sent home, and you have to explain to your parents, as you said, that you had a family tradition of serving. So the shame, so that coupled with, the questions, why, what happened, how did you answer that?
I can't really say. I remember very vividly the room where I told my parents. I was absolutely terrified of how they would react. My father and mum had been so proud of me being in the Royal Navy. My dad had come on board my ship. They visited me. It was just a huge deal. So having to tell them that I was going to be thrown out was one thing. But at that point, being forced to come out to your parents when you don't really know what reaction you're going to get, it was just horrific. And I have to say, I am incredibly lucky that both my parents were hugely supportive of me at that point in time and ever since. And so I was in many ways one of the lucky people that when that happened to me, I did have a home I could go to and people that supported me. Whereas I know many people just simply didn't. They ended up with no family, no friends, and no forces to actually help them move on with their lives.
To get, and also the thing is that finally, they've announced an inquiry into all of this. Because when you think about it, the number of servicemen and women who went through similar and worse experiences. So am I right in thinking there goes your pension? You could be stripped of any, any awards, any medals or anything like that?
Yes, all sorts of things. And if you had a dishonourable discharge, your piece of paper that you had to show your next employer would mean that potentially you wouldn't get that job. I mean, when I was thrown out in the 90s, there were at least 300 people a year being thrown out. So extrapolate that to 2000, when the law finally changed after I and a few other people took our cases to the European Court. That's thousands of people. And honestly, I do believe that if we hadn't gone to the European Court, that law would have been in place for at least another decade. So that's hundreds more. And at that point, at 2000, everybody, in the government went, oh, okay, let's change the law. And then they forgot about everybody. They completely abandoned everybody that they put through that horrific experience and just left them. So 20 years on, they finally apologized in 2020. We actually got an apology from the government. And after 2 years of hard work by people like Fighting with Pride, the charity, who were working with the government to make this happen, they have now announced the review into the effect of the ban and what it's had as the legacy of it for veterans coming out under those circumstances. But it's taken 6 months to now get to the point where we have a head, Lord Etherton, actually appointed. So only now are we able to start telling our stories and actually bring to light the horror and the mental strain, the financial strain, the housing strain, the lives that have been destroyed for no other reason than we didn't want to sleep with the opposite sex.
And so when you say the financial strain, imagine if you've been in the armed forces and you're nearing retirement age and somebody, blurts out that you might be gay, or they are arrested themselves and under pressure give your name away. It's like stuff out of 1984 or the, police state stuff.
Yeah, well, you can see, I mean, you speak about Dame Kelly Holmes, you can see exactly, I can completely understand why she was not able to speak openly about that part of herself for so long, because the fear that you live under when you're in the armed services at that time particularly is absolutely huge. And for her going into then athletics, where again things were maybe open secrets within your particular bubble of people that you were working with, but you certainly weren't encouraged or allowed to be able to just be yourself. So imagine the strain that that's had on her to get to this point. But you talk about financial, people no pensions, and so have been in financial straits ever since they retired, or simply weren't able to get jobs because of that dishonourable discharge.
And we should, for people just thinking, well, so what? I'm just thinking about it in practical terms. If you're in any organisation, let's talk about when you were in the military, it means you can never date. Even if you don't date somebody in the military, most military bases are near somewhere or a ship comes into port.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that that civilian person, if you dated, they could be questioned as well?
No, I don't think that they would ever go beyond the military boundaries at that time. I'm certainly thankful that people who are now in the armed services, and I've met some of them, have had the most wonderful experiences being part of the military.
Yeah.
And you know, they now recruit at Pride. I came across them at recruiting at Brighton Pride one year, which completely blew my mind. And they've now started marching. All three major services are marching in London Pride just this weekend. It's a huge change for a massive organisation like that. It's an amazing thing that's happened. But still,
fighting with pride is, I was going to say fighting with pride is great, but just going back to the days, what I mean is that if you were near a base or you dated a civilian or what have you, and one of your colleagues saw you with somebody else, I mean, it stops you. How could you ever date? How would you dare? You must be thinking all of the time of the way you interact with everybody.
Yes, you do. You can't be a freely functioning person. You cannot give your full self to your job even, because half of you or part of you is always going to be closed off in that sense. And so you don't. You know, certainly I didn't. I was not dating anybody throughout my entire time in the armed services, and I had no intention to, because I wanted to serve in the armed services, and that wasn't possible.
Yes. So, as you say, thank God after all this time, because it is extraordinary. When you think back to me, 2000's like not long ago. But thank God that things are starting to change. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for shining a light on something that needs to be talked about a lot more. And congratulations on the amazing work that you have done. Former radio operator, first class Emma Riley, there talking about the difficulties of being gay in the armed forces, which thankfully no longer exist. Thank you so much for joining me today, which has been an absolutely fascinating show. Thank you.